Hey guys, this week I'm bringing back my Fruit Friend series, which I make using polymer clay, and now that it's summer by me, I figured what better fruit to do than a pineapple. Now, I knew I needed to figure out how to simplify the pineapple because the fruit itself is pretty complex. It's got those hexagon sections all over the outside, which creates that classic pineapple pattern, as well as that super leafy top. I did a quick sketch to try and figure out how I wanted to go about these different parts. I started with the basic pineapple shape, then added a bunch of long leaves sticking straight out the top. When I moved on to the pattern, instead of the hexagon shaped sections, I simplified it into diamond shape, which you see a lot in cartoon pineapple drawings. Then, moving on to the face, I sketched out some cute little eyes, made sure to add in some cheeks, and then went with the biggest smile. Once I was happy and felt like I was heading in the right direction, I started sculpting. When it comes to sculpting, I start with the aluminum foil to get the basic shape. I then roll out some polymer clay and wrap it around the foil to start creating the fruit part of the pineapple. Then when all the foil is covered and the clay is in the shape I want it, I'll start smoothing the clay out using my fingers and some clay softener. Now that the clay is pretty smooth, I wanted to add in the pineapple pattern. At first I tried to freehand it using my silicone shaper tool. I knew I needed diagonal lines wrapping around the pineapple in both directions, so I sort of tried to eyeball each part and hope they matched up. But to nobody's surprise, they definitely didn't. I was left with super wonky diamond shapes and just did not like how it turned out. So I scrapped it and had to restart. This time, I actually went around and, sort of measured things out. I created 5 lines around the top of the pineapple and tried to evenly spread these out, then drew 5 lines at the base of the pineapple that were pretty much directly below the top ones I just created. I used these as my guidelines for the diagonals, that way I had a point to start from and a point to match up with, in hopes that it would create more symmetrical diamond shapes in the end. I started with the top line and then would match the diagonal with every 3rd line at the base. So not the one straight underneath or the next one over, but the 3rd one out. And of course, since this is hand measured and not extremely precise, not every diamond came out symmetrical, but they were so much closer in shape and size this time around, so I would call this a success. I then went back in with my shaper tool and further defined each line, as well as cleaned up some of the diamond shapes, that way they were as close to even as I could get them. And then I moved on to the face. For the face, I take my clay dotting tool and press out 2 indents for the eyes. I tried to line them up where 2 diagonal lines met, that way I didn't have an eye sitting directly in the middle of the fruit. Then I rolled up 2 circles for the eyes themselves and plopped them straight into the holes. Next up was the mouth, and for this I take the smallest dotting tool I have and carve out the cutest happy smile right in the center of that diamond. And once I was done with that, all of the main face details were done, so I stuck it in the oven for the first bake. While the main part of the pineapple was baking, I started on the leaves. For these, I knew I needed them to be bigger and taller than what I was used to, so I rolled out a sheet of clay and used my X-Acto blade to carve them out. I figured I needed something to stick the leaves onto, that way they would stand straight up. So I balled up a small amount of clay and used that almost as a base for the leaves to pop out of. I gently stick all the leaves onto this base and smooth the bottoms together, that way they wouldn't fall right off. I wanted there to be a main tall leaf in the center and then have the others fan out around it, sort of like how I had it in my sketch. After some messing around, I got all the leaves to stick together, and when the main part of the pineapple was out of the oven, I measured the leaves up against it to see if the sizes matched up or not. I definitely found that the leaves were too big compared to the base and had to go back and take some size off of them. To do this, I would take my X-Acto knife and carefully shave some clay off the bottom, just a little at a time. Then I would go back in with my shaper tool to blend and stick the leaves back together. I repeated this a few times until I got the leaves to be the size I wanted them, and finally attached it to the body of the pineapple. I add on some cheeks and decided to make them a bit different than usual. I pushed 2 little clay ovals right under the eyes to try and make them stand out and be more 3D instead of just painting them on like I usually do. After that, the pineapple went back into the oven for the final bake, and then it was time to move on to painting. As always, I first add some primer. I find that without it, it takes so many layers of paint to get nice bright colors. So I do a few layers of primer until I get an even coverage, and then I went straight into painting. I went with a bright golden yellow for the pineapple itself and did a few layers of that. And then once it was nice and dry, I went in with a more mustard yellow for all the indents that create that diamond pattern. I use a small detail brush and just run it down each line to darken them up, which really makes the pattern pop. After that, I really felt like something was missing and wanted to add some more detail to the fruit, and that's when I remembered the little spikies that pineapples have all around them. So to try and imitate those, I took a lighter version of that golden yellow and make these little V shapes on most of the diamonds. It's a really small detail, but I'm so glad I added it. I made the leaves a bright green, and for some reason the green I have takes a bunch of coats to layer up. But after a few layers, I went in and added some lighter mint green highlights to the tops of each leaf. It's sort of an upside down V shape, which I felt really complemented the rest of the patterns as well. Finally, it's time to move on to the face details. For the face, I take a tiny brush and paint the eyes black before going back and adding the whites to the eyes. I focus the white on the outer edges to give my pineapple these big cartoony eyes, and then use my dotting tool to add a nice white highlight to each one. I use a bright hot pink to paint the blush of the cheeks, but then quickly realized I didn't like how it looked with the other colors. So I go back and lighten it up with some white and do more of a baby pink. Last step was taking a little of that mustard yellow from before to darken up the mouth to bring out that smile, and with that, my pineapple is finished. I think he's the perfect addition to my fruit friend collection, and I just love his colors and the summery feel he has. I hope you guys enjoyed seeing how I created him, and if you did, please feel free to like and subscribe for more. I'll link my fruit friend playlist below if you haven't seen them, and stay tuned to see who gets added to the group next.